Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Melissa Chiu, and I'm the director of Asia Society Museum in New York. And I'm joined by two wonderful speakers, Tom Eccles and Mariko Mori. It's a pleasure to be able to share the stage with both of them, because today we're going to be talking about a brand new project called the Adobe Museum of Digital Media. And Tom has curated a number of the first projects, and Mariko is the second artist to be commissioned to do a special project to be launched next spring. Just a little bit of background. Tom is actually the director of the School for Curatorial Studies at Bard, otherwise known as the Curators School, and he's of course curated the first number of projects. He's going to also talk about a little bit about his curatorial strategy to do with the Adobe Museum. And then Mariko Mori, I'm sure many of you already know her work. She's one of these kind of art stars, if you like, around. She really first burst onto the scene in the 1990s with her photographic works, and was really one of the first artists to employ digital imaging in her work. And so we're going to hear from her not just about her project for the Adobe Museum, but also a major new project called Seven Light Bay, which is a project that she has conceived for an island called Miyako Island in Okinawa. And it really is for her a major step in a new direction, of course, still in the vein of some of her other projects, but very important because of the scale of it. I had the pleasure of working with Mariko just recently, where at Asia Society we presented Kumano, which was a video she created in 1996 that featured, actually, it was a video piece that featured a lot of digital imaging alongside actual video footage. And so that combination of digital created imagery along with actually the more filmic, I think also was an important kind of turning point in her work, but we'll get to that perhaps a little later. I wanted to open up the discussion with Tom, actually, because Tom, you've now in the process of organising some of these first exhibitions for the Adobe Museum. Why don't you tell us about how you came to work with Adobe and what the Adobe Museum is all about?
Yeah. So it's the first image. So beginning really last summer, Adobe had been working with their partners at Goodby Silverstein to think about what a digital museum would be. And in many ways, Adobe has been the forefront of the evolution of digital media, but they didn't want to kind of create a space to sort of profile what they'd done. They wanted to think about what would be a web-based project that could profile artists and how they've used digital media, not necessarily Adobe media. Many of the collaborators with Adobe and others. So they identified an architect called Filippo Innocenti from Rome, from Zaha Hadid's studio in Rome. And Filippo, with a group called Unit 9, who are kind of really exciting web producers in London, created this museum building, sort of museum, a site that could really be anywhere. It was meant to be a physical site in some way, or at least certainly three-dimensional site, and also a potential archive for projects. So within this kind of helix, they're meant to be these various pods where you can actually find previous projects, talks, salons, what have you. And one of the things I was asked to curate the sort of initial project, or an initial project, and I guess the sort of beginning point was, in a way, there's kind of nothing worse than this category of digital art. In a way that is a sort of like already codified, something that's kind of almost unsuccessful. Like remember when, 12, 15 years ago, the web came out, we thought artists were all going, this was going to be the new frontier for art. But that doesn't mean that artists haven't used digital media, and in fact digital media has revolutionized contemporary art, certainly in my time. And of course I used to work at the Public Art Fund, run the Public Art Fund in New York, where we were used to making these rather kind of large-scale projects, and it so amazed me how many artists actually were able to realize previously unthinkable artworks using emerging technologies. And so I didn't want to do artists who necessarily kind of celebrated digital media, but artists who I thought in some ways had done something interesting with the technology and were trying to say something quite unique that wouldn't have been possible otherwise without the kind of technologies that Adobe have been responsible for bringing. In a way, the museum here is much like any other website. It's a platform, just like any other museum. And it's kind of interesting. It's like we sort of face the issues that you do have within any museum. You build this kind of great building, you put a lot of energy into the building, but then you start to think, well, what kind of artistic program could one have? And of course, I think with digital media, you can have any kind of program. And I also want to
Tom,
kind
I think that's, if I could just interject just for a moment, I think that's a really interesting question, because this in a way is the fundamental question that you had to think of when selecting artists for this museum project, in that, you know, how did you think about it in a different way?
So I was trying to think that, rather than the digital media being a kind of new frontier, it allows us actually to explore who we actually are. And art being a kind of great communicator of where and who we are in the world today. And not take this kind of site as this otherworldly place. So we invited Tony Ausler, and really his project, which is about, has about, 17, 18 distinct zones where we discuss different aspects of the web. The web is kind of a kind of portal onto who we are in a way. Today it's kind of, you are who you surf, or what you surf in some ways. So this is kind of this quite dark in some ways, sometimes funny as well, existential portrait of who we are and how we use new media. And then I was kind of interested in a very different kind of form, and to have a discussion with Mariko, who first was really used digital photography, or the manipulation of the photographic image, in ways that we'd never seen before, on a scale that was really revelatory, I think, to many of us. You know, and I think it was 95 at Jeffrey Deitch Gallery, she presented Birth of a Star, and a photograph we all know called Empty Dream, where Mariko appears in this artificial beach as a mermaid.
In fact, we were talking earlier about some of the costumes that Mariko wore in these photographs, and she assures us that she still has them.
And so that, Mariko used, this was kind of an aha moment, I think, for a lot of us in terms of the possibilities of digital manipulation. But what was interesting with Mariko was later on, only a few years later, she started to use these very technologies to speak of a spiritual realm, in many ways going back to her youth and her connection with Shinto Buddhism. And I thought that was kind of unique, that we never really, we normally think of, say, religion or spirituality as completely antithetical to new technologies. And I thought that was a really interesting, quite unique voice that Mariko has developed over the last few years.
And what was your first encounter with Mariko's work? Before we move on to you, Mariko, where I'm just interested in Tom's.
Well, it was this photograph, this incredible photograph of Mariko as a kind of great star.
Because Mariko
as a mermaid
was trained not only in art, but of course fashion, and had a very brief moment as a model as well, which you can of course see very clearly. But
and then we did a project together, which you'll see as we roll these slides. We did a project together called Wave UFO, which is probably one of the most technologically advanced artworks ever, where she used, she basically digitally, she created digital imaging of the human brain in real time, in this kind of time capsule called Wave UFO. So,
so Mariko, now, would you, for audiences here, I'm presuming that they, of course, know your work, but perhaps you'd like to tell them about some of your more recent thoughts, because really, especially the 7 Light Bay project in Okinawa is such an important new step for you. Why don't you tell us about how you came to making this?
Yes, perhaps a lot of people here doesn't know development of my new work, which is I think showing at the moment, which work is kind of an installation. It's interactively kind of changing the colors according to the nature, connection to nature. One before was kind of star alignment, planetary alignment of a solar system, and also one before was connected to neutrino detective system. So whenever the supernova burst, supernova explosion happened, it would capture neutrino and display in a work. So there is a kind of connection to the nature. Kind of the work is tried to unite between celestial and the terrestrial. So this is kind of the work. It's developed since Tom introduced about the way before, but since then. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then why don't you tell us a little about the project that you have for Adobe Museum that will be launched in the spring?
Yes. We don't get to the image quite yet, but just the Adobe Museum for an artist is kind of have opportunity to create a kind of work that cannot really produce in a real life. So it's really kind of creating a free space that you can share your idea, share your concept, and share with space without any material. Also, I find that it's very interesting that having a museum online, which is take all the boundaries with culture or the location, whoever they are able to enter to the museum, and then whoever came could share the idea together. So these two idea that I find it very interesting, and I often use kind of digital media in order to create a space prior to actually the installation. So I'm quite familiar with using this kind of a digital media to present and share idea with broader audience.
Well, it might be good also to just talk about the specific project, because
exactly.
Mariko is a very specific land-based project, and on Mariko Island, which she found through Google Earth, and she wants to create a kind of form of pilgrimage to this site where she's making a work as a gift of the artist to the island, which you could explain. But I thought what was interesting was that the kind of digital museum allows us to actually show the process of the work, not only being conceived, then being made, and then being realized, and giving you a very real connection to a real place that you potentially would never be able to go to. Mm-hmm. So quite the opposite of, say, James Turrell's project, or say a Heiser project, where that, you're always creating that kind of that sense of great distance between you and the work, using this space as a way to kind of connect people all the way through the process to realization.
Yeah. Some of the images that you're seeing now are the sources of inspiration for Mariko's new project. And Tom mentioned before her rather unique approach to using technology to talk in a new way about spirituality. Sometimes this is about Shintoism, other times about another kind of Buddhism. So I think that what is actually important to note about her project is that it's very grounded in a specific place, that what she intends to do with the Adobe project is transmit real-time images so that you can see Mariko Island, which is a very, and the site that Mariko's chosen is a very extraordinary kind of inlet or bay that is not built up, it's all natural, and she has chosen or created 2 sculptures that she will actually install there, the first phase of which will be completed in May. So you'll see the site in process through the Adobe Museum project.
Yep.
And here we're seeing more images that were sources of inspiration, both in the natural world through cosmology. Here we have topographical representations. Mariko, did you have anything more to add in terms of your Adobe project before we move on?
Well,
because you talked about this as being your dream project.
yes.
You know, talk about why it's your dream project.
Yes. Well, I since 2003, after way before, I tried to really spend more time with the nature, and I put myself surrounded by nature, and then I started to kind of discover kind of a experience that started to feel idea that I'm also a nature being. And I wanted to kind of create a work that can honor the nature and also blessing our being as a nature. So this was kind of a two theme that I had in my mind, that I liked to create a work and give a gift to the site and to the landscape. So this work is particularly, as I show you the prehistorical images, prehistorical culture archaeological site, which that you can, it's evident that we share the same idea. We have a universal idea, being part of nature, and I wanted to reintroduce, to reconnect with nature. So therefore that we feel feel this, we are same, and we feel the one again. So that was kind of purposes of creating this work, and I wanted to bring it become a kind of pilgrimage place, so that people could travel to the actual site to experience it.
And you should explain about the solstice and light and the...
Yes, I should explain. So there was a two sculpture, and at the winter solstice,
That's right.
solstice, when the sun goes down, the sun pillar will cast shadow to the moonstone.
Yes.
So it's kind of a symbol of a rebirth, because the winter solstice was often used as symbol in a prehistorical culture, our new beginning, because beginning of new life in the nature and rebirth of our being.
So you're seeing the sun pillar right here in the image.
As
And
you
then
would
if we
play
could
the
just go
animation
back
of
a
this.
couple of images and see the sun and the moon piece together. Yeah, here we go. So the moon piece is the spherical work in the water. It appears like it's floating in the water. And you're watching a
So the moonstone will be changing color by the water tide, and then now it's the shadow is casting to the moonstone.
And Melissa is taking a group from for the Asia Society for the Hong Kong Art Fair, I believe, in May.
right.
So,
Next year in
to
May.
which you're all welcome.
But I think I had one kind of final question for Mariko, and then I wanted to talk to Tom a little bit more about museum practice. But Mariko, since we're talking about artists and digital imaging, especially since the project is not only in a real place, real time, but also going to be on the Adobe Museum, I'm wondering about when did you first, I mean, you kind of were best known for photographs, and then your work evolved into using digital images. What was the attraction for working with digital form for you?
Well, I think it's as what the reason why the interesting to have this new media museum, because it's a freedom to create whatever you like to create. And then I guess that using this, technology that I dreamed and I created, and then I made it realize. If I wasn't able to create first in images, I won't be able to convince people to make it to real life. So that's, I think, the
But I'm thinking back to the times when you first, in fact, were starting to create these images. And in fact, it wasn't really complete freedom at all, because the technology that we had at that time to create images was rather limited.
Yes.
So how did you come to terms with that?
I enjoy actually collaborating with engineers to develop a new technology for it, because I feel if it's you creating a new space and you're really creating a new vocabulary for art, and something that I couldn't really express with the traditional form, I can express through the technology. So, yes.
And then, Tom, I guess I wanted to just have a very brief, thoughts from you on the idea itself of a digital museum.
Right.
That, coming from the perspective of a museum where museums are really all about permanence, when we acquire a work of art, it's really a promise to the artist and broader society that you're going to preserve it for posterity. And with digital images, as we all know, posterity is a real issue. In fact, many works made in new technologies are made to be impermanent. There is no tangible physical object. So I wonder, I wanted to throw it open to you as two museum people, how do we come to terms with what is in effect something that is antithetical to what we do?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, my colleague Johanna Burton, who runs the graduate program, she said, oh my gosh, the two words that never go together, digital and museum. And
it's true.
I like those kind of challenges. And, one of the things that I was kind of interested with this, I don't know what the answer is with what we do with new technology in the future and permanence. We're all grappling with the inventor of the World Wide Web, Nam June Paik now. The first artist really to realize the potential of new technologies in some ways, and everyone's now kind of really worrying about what they do with the Nam June Paik works and how they maintain them. And we have a handheld at the Hessel Museum in Bard. We have a handheld television set, early handheld television set, which no longer gets signals. For example.
But the idea of a digital museum is one step even further removed, at least to Nam June Paik as a physical object, right?
Well,
so
what's interesting, I think what this is in process, and I give a lot of credit to Adobe for embarking on this and then going with, what is a process. I think what we didn't recognize in some ways, it's a fast-moving project. We didn't realize the importance of social networking within this kind of environment. And we have a message board which has the most kind of really very positive messages and some of the nastiest messages I've ever got. And I'm like, wow, it has hundreds of thousands of messages. And our visitorship is incredibly high. And I think we're looking at that and saying, okay, how do we, once you create something like this, you've created a need, a discourse, an expectation, and we're thinking, okay, well, we're going to commission these large-scale projects. We want to be involved in that kind of ambition, but we also want to respond to a community that's out there, that's certainly a younger generation than myself. I work with young curators, which I'm very privileged to do, and we have a number of curators who are very familiar with working in a web-based format and thinking about a curatorial residency, commissioning younger artists, trying to create different kinds of platforms within this space. So in many ways, we're sort of addressing a lot of the issues that museums have to address, but in a very kind of super speed environment. It's funny, I don't think we realized the amount of speed with which we have to respond.
Yeah. I mean, what I found interesting about the Adobe Museum experience online when you go and log on is that in a way it does what all museums try to do, which is you have an individual experience. So there is, I'm not sure what you call it, but the little guide
Yeah.
throughout the museum, which is this kind of floating fish-like mechanized object that talks to you. So this is something that you feel very special because it's one-on-one experience, which is, I think, what all museums are trying to do. It's like create this very unique viewer experience.
Yeah.
So that's what you're able to do online that you perhaps can never do within a big museum.
Yeah, no, I mean, originally, you know, my daughter goes, she's 12, and when she was 11, she used to go on this site called Penguin, and these penguins go about and they talk to each other. You choose your penguin and you go around.
Yeah.
And we actually thought we could do something like that.
Yeah.
It actually proved to be very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So could you actually have the experience within the space that other people are actually there at the same time? And it's something which we're sort of thinking about how we might address now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, because
Yeah.
part of the experience of being in a museum and looking is also seeing other people looking.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
I have something to say
Yes.
about the digital museum is that actually dematerialization. It's kind of it's a strange thing to say in an art fair, but it's really you have no material, you have a concept, and you have space, and you let go of all your materials and just you share this. And this is something that we could really use as a tool to communicate each other, and something that we could looking forward to explore.
Mariko's project will be up in March this year in Adobe, on Adobe
Yes,
website.
exactly.
So you're not going to say that.
And the project in the real world in May.
And the real world, the first phase will be completed in May. So it'll be a big project. But I thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We'll all be around for questions if you have them of us. But thank you very much.
Yeah.